Alright, welcome to Primal Vinyasa Fundamentals. This is a specific class to map the major joints of our bodies, specifically shoulders, hips, and our spine. So in this class, we're really using it as an exploration to consider that the way in which our body isn't just through length range ratio via stretching, but really to explore all the possibilities that are available within our major joints to enhance blood flow. So we'll start in a seated position. Bring your arms back behind you and widen your feet a little more than your yoga mat or whatever you're sitting on. Draw both of your knees over to the left. Take your right arm with you and rotate. Come back through center, take both of your knees to the right, and again rotate. So first, just using this to explore what ranges you have in your spine, your shoulders, your hips. And now when you come back to neutral to get a truer assessment, when you fix your pelvis, draw both of your knees to the left without lifting your sit bone, and draw both of your knees to the right. And as you do this side to side, you're getting internal rotation and external rotation. Internal rotation and external. So if you can only go just a little bit, that's going to give you an assessment. And again, you have to open your feet, open the chain a little bit, and find that range. Then you open the chain of your pelvis and you'll find that you have more range available. So just explore that. Notice if one side is different than the other, if one side has more range, because it will. Being humans, we have no sides that are exactly the same. And interestingly enough, we don't want that. The two sides don't have to be the same because we're bipedal. We are diverse humans. So really it's just to explore and assess. Maybe one side you do need to build a little more strength, and one side you do need to build a little more mobility. So now we're going to do a little mapping here with the hip range. Come down onto your right side and your right elbow. Lift your left leg up off the ground and come into what would be standing neutral. Then take your left hip forward. This is hip flexion. Without changing your spine, just stay neutral. Come back into hip extension and hip flexion. Hip extension and hip flexion. Now from here, find what we call circumduction, otherwise known as circular hip motion. And bring your left leg down on the ground and again work your hip range, internal and external. And explore. And I can feel for myself where I really don't have as much external rotation as I do internal. And that's different for everyone. Come to neutral and explore the other side. Left arm down. Bring your right leg up. This would be standing neutral. Hip flexion, hip extension. Hip flexion, hip extension. Do that a few times, keeping your spine relatively neutral. And then go into circumduction, big circular motions. Notice if you can control the speed, picking it up or slowing it down. You want to go both ways. Bring your right foot down, external and internal rotation. And really this is just a feel-good sequence for warm-up and body mapping. And of course, the knee joints are part of the picture, but with the knee joints, they're a bicondylar joint, or otherwise known as a hinge joint. They don't have as much range as a hip joint. So of course, the knees are part of the picture, same with the ankles, but we're just focusing here. Now come up to neutral, and we'll add the spinal range of motion with the hip range of motion. So again, drop both knees over to the right, rotate your spine, so that's thoracic rotation. Do spinal flexion where you round your spine and then stretch forward. Come back to neutral, find spinal extension. Rotate, round, and flex as you fold forward. Rise up, spinal extension, and you can lift your left arm up, that's called shoulder flexion. Take your arm down into shoulder extension, take your arm up into shoulder flexion, so you explore your shoulder range. Now take your arm into shoulder flexion, dive forward, and find spinal flexion. Rise back up, come to the other side. Again, rotate, that's thoracic rotation. Take spinal flexion like you would in a cat position, dive forward. Come back up, spinal extension, back, mid-back, upper back, and even your cervical spine. Then take spinal flexion, spinal extension, and now take shoulder flexion. So you want to actually flex the entire joint. Don't pull your shoulder down, lift it all the way up. And take it back into extension and flexion. Feel those ranges here. Then explore your dive and your rise. And again, I have internal rotation of my right leg, external rotation, spinal extension, thoracic rotation, shoulder flexion. So it's a lot of language, which the reason why I'm saying it is it's important as a student or even as a teacher to be able to map our major joints and even know maybe what a teacher or someone is talking about in a class. So as you explore back and forth, find the different ranges, all the possibilities that are available when you move. You can even start to add a lift of your legs and your pelvis so that this starts to become your ground sequence where there's no right or wrong way to move. And in the foundations, just like a child would move on the ground, they would find different ways to explore the earth and eventually come up, eventually stand, eventually crawl. And it's in those early stages of development that our major joints are building strength and range. So after you've done that a few times, just come back to neutral, cross your ankles, come to kneeling. You can even pull a block in. Come to kneeling and sit on your block. Okay. Rest your hands in your lap. Go ahead and close your eyes. And feel now with your mind, your somatic sense, dropping your awareness down and in to your major joints of your pelvis, the major joints of your hips. So your pelvis is actually two bones, two halves that come together. You have a major joint in the front called your pubic symphysis, and in the back, where the two halves join, you've got your SI joints. Then you've got your major hip joints. And we want these joints to have what's called healthy arthrokinematics. We want them to move in a lot of different ranges through various loads, not just external rotation like a pigeon pose, or be able to forward bend or just back bend. There's all those ranges. So once you find neutral here, rest your hands in your lap and we'll work with some directional breath as well as some dimensional breath. So allow yourself to settle and land. And on your inhalation, breathe down into your pelvis and into your hip joints. So feel the pressure of your breath moving in and moving down. And then as you exhale, lighten the load, lighten your seat. Draw your navel, your abdomen, your spine, the contents of your weight upward through dynamic gravity, through a dynamic rising. And then relax that tension and inhale, breathe your breath down, wide and full, into your pelvic bowl, into your hips. And then exhale, lighten your load, lengthen up through your spine, through your skull, through your entire center of your body. Relax that tightening, and again, inhale, breathe down. And one more time, exhale, a dynamic rising. Then I want you to try opposite. So most of the time what happens, open your eyes. Most of the time what happens when we breathe in, we pull our breath up into our chest. And then when we breathe out, we push our breath down. So we actually bear down on our major joints. So try that. Inhale, pull up. We call this uptight breathing. And exhale, push down, bear down on your breath. So that's usually a stress pattern or even what we call mild hyperventilation. So in opposition to that, on the inhalation, your diaphragm moves down and wide. On the exhalation, your diaphragm moves back to neutral and everything stabilizes. So now we'll add this with a drill called kneel to heel. Also, when you're breathing dimensionally, your breath is three-dimensional. So if this was my spine, I'm going to try to balance this, but if this was my spine, my breath is three-dimensional around my spine. It's not just an up and down rigid structure. It's everything that's around the spine itself. So the breath has dimensions as well. So from kneel to heel, using your danda, your closet, coat rack, whatever you can find, your broom, anything along those lines. So pause here. Push down into your danda. Feel the strength of your trunk, your abdomen, your spine, your back, your legs, everything tone. And inhale, breathe down and wide and full. As you exhale, rise up. You can bend your elbows to do this and come up to neutral without pulling your shoulders up, without shortening. Inhale, come on back. Exhale, rise and draw up. And again, inhale, come down. And exhale, rise up. Come back to neutral, come down. Move your danda to the side. Slip your right leg into half primal squat. And you can stay on your block if you'd like, or you can sit on your heel. And I want you to try kneel to heel with just sitting on your heel and coming up and down. So push down through both of your feet and rise up like you did before. And come back down. Now, the regression would be to use your danda here. So you can come up and you can come down. And this is a lot for some people's knees. So again, the progression is to stay on your block and add a little bit of support there. So try that just a few times, your kneel to heel, and working with your major joint that goes from neutral to flexion. So both hips come into flexion, and then both hips come towards neutral. Right hip stays in mild flexion. Come to kneeling and switch sides. So kneel to heel with your half primal. Push down through your danda and rise up. You can adjust your leg or your stance, however feels good. And then again, lead with your pelvis. So go back to come down. Push down, press through your legs, and rise, and come back down. So already my legs are getting tired because this is a lot of work just for your legs. So it doesn't matter if you do 2 or 3 or you do 20. Just working to feel the muscles of your legs, that structure supporting you. Now take your danda to the side. I'm going to remove my block and come back to the first side. Now I'm going to turn to the side so you can see the spinal movements. Right leg comes into a squat position. Left leg is your virasana leg. Adding on for your spine, press your fingertips down. We call this half primal spinal. Rise up through your spine. Take your hands to your knees and lift up through your chest. Go low back, mid back, upper back. Spinal extension. Dive forward, round your spine, flexion. Come to neutral, take rib rotation, not by pulling from your arms, but just using your spine to do the movement. And then you have lateral spinal flexion. I'm going to add my arms just because it helps to enhance that range. And now just like in your hips, you can find that full circular range going from extension to flexion to lateral motion. And now you can add your rising up like you just did, your half primal, kneel to heel, adding spinal, lateral flexion, spinal flexion, rotation, and then consider your shoulders. Shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, shoulder flexion, shoulder extension. And using your mind just to really map all the ranges which your shoulders can take, your spine, your back, your sacrum, until you feel some warmth and blood flow there. Switch sides. And one of the things that I do when I teach, it's very rare that I'll just cue inhale, do this, or exhale, do this. Because what I want you to feel is that no matter what position you're in, so if I'm in extension, I can breathe in or I can breathe out. If I'm in flexion, I can breathe in or I can breathe out. Same with lateral movement. A healthy body can breathe no matter what what position it's in. Okay? So practicing that as you find your different ranges, from your kneel to heel, to your dive, to your rotation. And again, remember, even when you take your arms back into shoulder extension or shoulder flexion, you can add them towards the midline. We call this adduction or abduction. Your shoulders also have external rotation, internal rotation, overhead, internal rotation, external rotation. So there's an infinite number of ranges that your body can take. Come to neutral, stretch out your legs, you can shake them out, cross your ankles, bring them in front of you, just give them a little shake. Cross your ankles again, press back into downward facing. And start to move through your downward dog, exploring your hip and pelvis range once more. And then pause and take a full breath in and a full breath out. However you'd like to get forward, squat down, grab your dandy danda, and stand up. Okay, so now in the standing position, we'll be working with the same ranges through hips and shoulders. So I'm going to turn to the side so that you can see some of the range. Stand on your right foot and take your danda into your left hand. Then bend your left knee. So again, you have hip flexion and hip extension. Hip flexion and hip extension. Again, you've got your circular motion. Find both pathways of movement. External rotation and internal rotation. Adduction and abduction. So again, this is to map our major joints. And as you start to do this, you can come behind, forward, out to the side, working between all those places that are most of the time for us sticky. You can choose your pace. Okay, step down, switch arms, and switch legs. Bend your right knee, and again, explore. Just mostly through your hip joints right now, and then we'll add shoulders and spine. No two sides have to be the same, so explore your range, rotations, front and back, posterior, anterior body, all the places that your amazing body can move. And step behind. Okay. Now I'm going to move the danda so you can keep it if you'd like. And come back to standing on my right leg. And now I'm going to add all the different ranges. So you've got your spine, extension, flexion, rotation, lateral. Your hips, all of their ranges. Your shoulders, all of their ranges. So now your movement practice is to get all of those ranges standing on one leg. Working through those different pathways and being curious and brave enough to move in ways that you don't normally move. I can come back down towards my half primal, stand up and take this range, step back down, find my half primal. So hopefully for you at home, this will look different than mine. Because again, there's infinite numbers of movement. And you can just stand up and switch sides. So you can really take this anywhere. You don't have to have yoga clothes on. You don't have to have a yoga mat. You don't have to be in the perfect place, but you can just stand on one leg and remember all the ways in which your hips, your shoulders, your spine moves. And no two sides have to be exactly the same. Again, I stress this a lot because I think in yoga, we think in such linear pathways that we stop listening to our intuition and we think I have to do it exactly the same from one side to the other. And that's not the truth of movement. Movement is an intuitive, diverse practice. So that's one of the things we're teaching in Primal, is to actually get out of our box, out of our cage of movement, and trust our bodies again. You can step back into downward dog and breathe. Feel how much more awake and alive and present you are here. Move in your downward dog however you'd like. And to finish, come back to your side sitting practice that you did in the beginning. Take your feet wide. Draw both knees over to the left. Rotate round. And again, try all of your different ranges of motion, from standing back to seated, exploring the ways in which you might possibly move from side to side. And sometimes we think, well, that doesn't look like a pretty or beautiful transition. But what starts to happen is that you explore various ranges on the mat. And remember that you have those possibilities in many more ranges than just one. So find your way into remembering that your body moves, that your body is intelligent, that you're not stuck, that there's no have-tos or shoulds or supposed-tos. Really, we get injured when we stop listening. We get injured from repetitive movement. So the more that you can practice in this way, you'll build your body's intelligence. So come to neutral, take a seat. Let your breath calm. Feel the warmth of your skin, the movement of your blood. And you can choose to stay seated to finish your practice, or you can lie onto your back. But now allow your hips and your pelvis, your spine, your shoulders, and all the other major joints we worked without even focusing our attention there, to sense that cellular turnover, the pathway of change. That it is possible that movement becomes medicinal. Movement is one of the greatest gifts in our lives, that we can come back to this space of gratitude, of presence, of awareness, and remember that we already know how to move, and we trust these pathways again and again. So you can choose to rest for as long as you'd like. Close your practice just by placing your hands somewhere on your body, somewhere where you'd like to bring an installation of connection, of movement, of remembrance. And may we remember together as beings that movement is truly our birthright.